Well, welcome back, folks. As you know, we are exploring the city's urban green space, past, present, and future. Earlier, with Mr. Baranoff, we talked about the past and how we got to the point where we are in the present. Joining me now is Council Member Jeremy Rogers, who is now been a council member for going on 2 years, or getting close to 2 years.
I think we're a year and a half.
And he is going to, or I'm going to try and get him to explore the city from the present and future perspective with regards to the downtown and the urban green space, and particularly with regards to the petition that's up for a vote on November 8th. So welcome. Thank you very much. I know it was last minute, but you're here.
Happy to be here.
Appreciate that. With that as a backdrop, what I just said, there is a raging debate going on in the city of Boca Raton right now with regards to development, with regards to urban green space. You have a RFP on the streets where you've hired an outside consultant to do an analysis of the park situation along the intracoastal and the city parks. There is a ton of activity and a very heightened political climate amongst the residents. And we're going to find out what their thoughts are on November 8th with regards to the wildflower site and with the other intracoastal properties. I'd like to get some of your perspective from over the last few years that you've been involved, what you see, what you think, and where you see the future is for the urban green space preservation for the new residents that are coming into Boca Raton. That'll be in the thousands actually over the next few years.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I mean, there's a lot of people have seen the new construction that's come out of the ground, and they say, where is everyone going to go? And I mean, the part that they don't realize is there's been projects that have been approved long before I even got on council that are yet to even break ground, some sizable ones. So even if we were not to approve a single thing starting today, there's still a lot of residents who are coming to downtown. So how are those people going to recreate, get access to the waterfront, hang out at the parks is certainly an important issue. In particular, I mean, the waterfront development plan, or how we're going to use our waterfront, it was a top goal, and it was my top goal that came out of our annual goal session. We have a lot of acreage on the intercoastal, on the beach, that a lot of people don't really have access to. And whether we're talking about Lake Wyman or Lake Rutherford or Gumbo Limbo or Red Reef or the wildflower site, all of these are very valuable and well-located properties that the average citizen can't get to right now. So that's a problem. I think we need to do a much better job in that, and not only providing new opportunities, but maintaining the ones we have. So just in our workshop today, and I know we're short on time, but to cover it, we talked about the Lake Wyman plan. How are we going to reopen those canoe paths that are in there? And it's a shame that they even got closed. How are we going to reopen the boardwalk there? And whether it's that or the Gumbo Limbo boardwalk, we need to make sure that all of our residents have access to the waterfront. That's a top goal for me.
Well, on the Lake Wyman thing, there are a few vocal people in the Golden Harbor area that make more of a problem than, or argue more for that it's a problem than it's not. But they can be satisfied. But getting back to the recreation and the development issues, in the downtown core, the only public space is Sanborn Square. And there is no other green spaces for people to walk to enjoy. So I
would say the center of Meisner Park too, maybe.
Well, the center of Meisner Park, yes, but it's part of that commercial development. The waterfront doesn't have any access. So this debate that's going on with the referendum for November 8th is really a critical debate as to what's going to happen with the wildflower site when you boil it all down. Your perspective on that, the alternative, it doesn't have to be 100% restaurant, 100% park. There is a medium, and some of the citizens have brought forward a lot of good ideas. What are your thoughts with regards to the alternative ideas?
So I think there's some great ideas out there. If you go back on the history of the wildflower and how we got where we are now, I mean, Hillstone basically answered an RFP, was accepted. It was the council at that time gave direction to negotiate a lease with it, and that's kind of where we find ourselves now. There's a survey that was done before that, some argument on the interpretation of that survey. I would say both sides have a little bit of validity to them, but the response to the survey was so small that you really can't take it into too strong of a decision process on that. So where we are now is we have a referendum in front of us. I think it's great to see the public involvement and the public engagement on that. That's been really positive. When a few of the people who were saying that council members weren't listening and there wasn't, they weren't getting the fair attention, I said, go get a book of emails or a book of petitions, because then we have to listen. That gets the attention whether you want it or not, and it shows you're not a special interest and just concerned about your backyard. It's a lot. If it's 2 or 3 people or even 10 people who live on the water saying that, that's a big difference than 1,500 signed petitions from people who live in the city. Then, it raises the question. I think that's good that they followed that. I'm glad that was followed. I'm not fully I wish the question had been asked a little more directly. So the concern I have is I've talked to many people who are on both sides of it. Some people, and they tend to be more in the West, say, where's my restaurant? I wish I could go to go eat on the water, and they just call it Euston's. They hear Euston's. And I've heard a lot of other people say, I don't want anything there. And I've heard a vast, as you said, there's kind of a big spectrum in between. Okay, food trucks, Starbucks, hot dog stand, Shake Shack. You can kind of build up to kind of the biggest commercial use that's there. And I think regardless what goes there, whether this referendum passes or not, and we could talk a little bit more about the pluses and minuses of it, but regardless of what goes at this site, we need to ensure that the public has access to the walkway behind it. So even if it does end up being a Hillstone, I think having that public access, having a walkway under the bridge, activating Silver Palm some, that's non-negotiable. And those things are not in the lease right now. So there's been a lot of talk from what's in the lease on reasons to vote against it. You can't guarantee that those things will be addressed when we look at the lease, but I could personally guarantee that I'm not going to support anything that doesn't provide full public access behind there.
Some people argue that the city council, without the direction of the public, has changed or attempted to change the course of history. We earlier today interviewed former council person Peter Baranoff, who was on the council at the time. And he unequivocally states that there was never an intention of the then council that decided to make this purchase to commercialize this purchase. Where do you think the city council comes with the enabling power to change the direction of the then city council that made the purchase?
I think I disagree with that to some extent. I mean, most of those decisions were made by most of those people on the council.
But the point is that the council then bought it specifically for purposes of creating a space for all citizens, not to commercialize. How do we get to the point now where the debate suggests that it was always bought for the purpose of commercializing? That flies in the face of what Mr. Baranoff says, and he was there at the time.
He was there, but everything was publicly recorded and we could go back and watch them. And certainly, and one sitting mayor at the time has been criticized for saying, access like a park or something like that. I think, so looking at what's best right now, what's most important to me, number one, is what's going to enable the most residents to bring them to the water and access it. And you could argue that, you could say a park might bring more people. You could also argue an eatery might draw more people and give more people access to the water. It really could be argued either way. Fortunately, it's not really clear which one would bring the most, but I think you could say a commercial establishment would bring more people to the water. Some people may say it brings too many people to the water.
Let me because we're going to run out of time soon, let me take you down a legal argument that was made at the council meeting. The lawyer for the petitioners argued that regardless of what happens on the November 8th ballot, because it's an ordinance, the city council is responsible and has the obligation and the right
to interpret
and implement. It was supported by Deputy City Manager Brown and by the city attorney. If the ordinance passes, the question was raised at the Federation meeting that the city council could still decide to put the Euston's restaurant there. Would that be something that you would support?
I don't think so. Certainly not without hearing from the public.
Well, if it's passed by the public, and the idea of moving forward with the lease, you would support putting the lease in place?
I think if that referendum passes, we need to respect the wishes of the people. So my concern is there's a lot of people who may want a restaurant and still vote for that because the referendum sounds good. They hear recreation space. They may not even realize they're voting against a use instance. But if it passes as it is to just, and it is the city council's obligation to both interpret and write new ordinances. So yeah, if it passes by public referendum, the city council has the ability to do whatever they want and to pass other ordinances that do that. But they also have the ability to get voted out of office, and it's just, it wouldn't be right to go against the public's will. I think again, if the question was, do you want a Houston's or Hillstone property at the wildflower site, I think we would have a clearer answer. I'm a little afraid that you're going to have a lot of voters going out, and at the top of the ticket is a Trump or a Hillary, and everyone's showing up for that, and then they're looking at this and they may not realize, and even if you look at some of the petitioners that have done it, where do you draw the line? The petitioning committee has made the case a smaller restaurant would be okay, but not a fuller one, and then it comes to the city council to determine that. And no matter what, you're opening yourself up to a lawsuit. Hillstone could say, well, why is a Shake Shack allowed? Why is, or vice versa. If we did a Hillstone, then you could get sued by the petition committee who said, what do you mean? We just told you we didn't want this, and it passed, if it passes. So I think it's going to be a gray area, but to answer your question, one, how we got to here, I think many of the sitting council members from that gave direction to move that direction, or council members before myself. And I would certainly look to get either more clarification or not move forward on the Hillstone property if the referendum passed.
Well, thank you for coming today. There are many other topics that we could have talked about,
particularly
particularly with the golf course. In the future, if you will allow me, I'll invite you back. I'd certainly like to explore some of your thoughts with regards to BocaWatch, because I know that you have been a major proponent of that, and I am a major proponent of that. So I thank you for taking the time today.
Golf belongs in our city. You could quote me on that. Thank you.
Golf belongs in our city. We got that one. Now, folks, so thank you very much. You've just heard you've heard today the past, the present, and then the present and the future. So we look forward to the next time.